Now we get to have a lot of fun with 5 experts who are working in various aspects of the cannabis distribution vertical. And everything from technology to distribution operations to law and insurance. And if you came to listen to that, then you're in the right place. We're going to go to my right and start with panelist introductions. I'll let you each introduce yourselves.
Well, thank you again, CCIA, great event, amazing group of people that we've been able to work with. My name is Mike Aberly. I'm the Senior Vice President for CanGen Insurance. I have over 15 years of cannabis insurance experience, and then on top of that, normal insurance experience beyond. I wrote one of the first insurance policies with Lloyd's of London, and then now with Hanover Re. We're not a direct retailer. We actually underwrite, manage, do the claims handling, and issue the policies directly to the retail brokers, who majority of them are in this room today.
That's great. Hi, my name is Hua. I'm a CEO and co-founder of Meadow. We build software in this industry, primarily serving retailers and delivery operators. My wife's also an edible manufacturer, and we help do some distribution for her as well in San Francisco.
Thank you.
My name is Tim Moreland. I'm the Compliance and Policy Director for Continuum Distribution. We are the product of River and Alta merger that just recently happened. Formerly, I served as the Legislative Director for BOE member Fiona Ma, and who's now Treasurer. And I'd like just to give a big shout out to our President, Sadie Reyes, sitting at this table, and some of the Continuum staff. So.
Good afternoon. My name is Nicole Howell-Newbert. I am the principal and co-founder of Clark Newbert LLP, which is a women-owned law firm focusing on corporate and regulatory issues for the cannabis industry. And I see a lot of familiar faces, so it's great to be here.
Good afternoon. My name is Michael Wheeler. I'm the Vice President of Policy Initiatives with Flowcana. Flowcana is a branded supply chain company connecting the small farms that grow craft cannabis primarily up north with the rest of the marketplace all around California. Glad to be here.
So I think that distribution sits at such a unique place in the supply chain. It has a bird's eye view into the policies and the trends, the opportunities and challenges all up and down the supply chain that we're all facing. And I think it can be an essential early warning system for us. So today our questions are going to focus on those 4 areas. What are the policies that we need to be looking forward to, the challenges, the trends, and the opportunities? We do not take Q&A today, so we're going to be asking these panelists a series of questions, starting with just what are the current compliance issues facing California distributors today? And we'll go, Mike, if you want to
make me go
start with
first.
that,
Okay.
please. Yes.
All right. So within my realm, the insurance side, I see it from an insurance point of view of issuing the proper endorsements that the state's going to require, from your MCP filings to your SR71s. Those are going to be very challenging. And right now, talking to a lot of the people here today, it still appears to be a huge burden of trying to find the right coverage just to comply with the state of California's transportation and delivery laws. We are working on one right now. It's actually at the Department of Insurance. It's waiting for approval. And once that it does happen, we will have those proper endorsements. And I think that's one of the biggest hurdles from the insurance point of view, is making sure you have the proper insurance for those operations.
I have a long list. I think metrics coming up. I think everyone should be aware of that. I think that's going to be a really big time suck. Sampling is an issue, right? We have a lot of things that we need to do for sampling. I'll let Tim talk deeply about that. He's giving me some eyes. We got apportionment. I think apportionment's a huge one that Tim can also dive into. I think that there's something that's being seen with license tampering. People photoshopping licenses and taking them and trying to buy a licensed product. I think there's something to be said about trust but verify, and something to look out for.
All right, thanks Hua for teaming me up.
tag
I'm
team.
going to say really quickly, there's a bill, Senate Bill SB 475 by Senator Skinner, that's going to try to seek and regulate the whole process around sampling. I'd like to thank Flocana, I'd like to thank CCIA for co-sponsoring that bill with us, so we're going to try to get our hands around it. The apportionment issue is a huge issue in the state of California. If you're not aware of that, local jurisdictions are charging distributors their gross receipts taxes, even if they do not have physical presence in the city. So we have to figure out proper apportionment rates that we have to pay to sell these into these cities. So huge issue. I would say my main compliance issue is the cultivation tax. Actually, this may be a weird one, but when you are a distributor, you're responsible for collecting the cultivation tax. Pretty simple when you're collecting cultivation tax based on flower. You have some solid numbers, but when it comes to manufactured products, we don't know how much cannabis is actually in the product or what type of cannabis. So it becomes a major obstacle in collecting the cultivation tax. I would personally like to ultimately see the cultivation tax done away with, and we just have an excise tax at the retail level.
Everyone will always clap for let's get rid of a tax. Good job, Tim. Coming from the BOE office, I love it. So all of those things, of course. I think just from my perspective as an attorney who works with clients who, call with or email with questions as they're operating their business on a daily basis, distributors are this major hub for all kinds of compliance issues, tax collection, calculation, as Tim pointed out, remediation plans, quarantine of product during that time, the issues that are presented by distributor to distributor transfers, and to the extent that there's still some gray area there about whether and to what extent product can be tested and have a COA, and whether that COA can actually transfer to the other distributor. Those areas that are unsettled, I think, present the biggest challenges for distributor clients right now. Just on a daily basis, how do you operate your business and make sure that you're doing things as closely as you can to the regs? So there are some judgment calls that people have to make, and being comfortable with operating your business in that kind of an environment.
I'm going to agree with everybody else, but also just take the opportunity to identify that I think, Nicole, you hit the one that I was most interested in talking about, which is whenever there's that misunderstanding or gray area in the regs, the distributor finds it right away because the retailer thinks one thing and the manufacturer thinks another thing, and distributor is in the middle trying to square that circle. The one that I'm thinking about and most worried about right now, sort of the freight train coming. I think if anybody looks at BDS analytics or any kind of market data, you can see that vapes and concentrates have a growing, commanding share of the market, which is exciting. And we also know that pretty much all the cartridges that are currently in inventory across California are not going to be able to be sold after July 1st. So fire sale by everybody in the state all at once to try to liquidate product through distribution to retailers that increasingly will say, no thanks, we don't need any more. And it's just going to be a nightmare of compliance. Do you have the universal sticker? Do you not have the universal sticker? We have to unwrap products to find out if it's actually there or not. It's going to be crazy. So that's the one that I'm thinking about the most right now.
Thank you.
Sell your vape cartridges before December 30th. Distributors before July 1st or June 30th, because that's going to be a huge issue. And honestly, Michael, I don't see that issue being resolved before then. So, something we should all think about as businesses and distributors, clients we take in, suppliers, and then also on the retail level, some purchasing decisions.
So starting with you, the next one. What can distributors do to help the small farmers, the craft manufacturers, the mom and pop stores?
Yay, support AB 858. I think that's a good one. Appellations and origin is going to be super important to tell all the small farmer stories and everything like that. Coming from Y Combinator, we have this thing saying like, do things that don't scale. And a lot of that's around how to build processes and learn and, create something of value that doesn't necessarily have to scale yet. And I think that oftentimes right now we're all looking at scaling and building up the biggest thing and all that. And what if there's an amazing OG Kush up in Mendocino that's just a little bit further from your territory to go get, but would really sell really well with the demographic that you're trying to reach. I think that would really help, and really trying to understand the stories behind everybody. If you look at wine, it has a lot of parallels to supporting small craft and the brewing scene too. So those are a few things that would help.
I would say one, support the various types of legislation that are out there for equity programs, for appellations. Those are extremely important. But two, as the cannabis industry, especially some of the bigger operators, we need to kind of put our money where our mouth is. There's a lot of talking points about we need to support social equity, we need to support the small farmer. But if we don't put the resources into actually supporting those folks and investment dollars and also the professional training, honestly, the grant money and the support is not enough to capitalize an equity applicant or even a small farmer. So we actually need to put our money where our mouth is and help in our professional experience and help these folks out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree with all of that. I mean, the point is to support and to understand issues that aren't just your own, as your immediately your own business's issues, but your partner's issues as well, and to be a coalition in that way. A practical thing that I was thinking of that's been coming up recently has to do with hopefully not, but the potential expiration of temporary licenses where there may be a gap where producers find themselves with an expired temporary license. There is a regulation that allows a licensed distributor or a micro business that has distribution as a function to apply to the Bureau to purchase that product within 14 days of the license expiring, and there's a form. It's the same, it's called LIC 27 form. That's what you use to notify the Bureau of all sorts of changes, and you can apply there to purchase that product. So if you are a licensee that is coming up on a temporary license expiration, you might want to start working with your distributor, kind of tee that up so that you don't lose the opportunity to sell the product that you have in inventory.
So I didn't pay to have this question added to the list, I promise, but this is all that Flocana does, is source product from small farms in Mendocino and Humboldt right now. 100% of the buds that are in our jars and the shake that's in the pre-rolls are all sourced from small farms, and I think that having that relationship with over 200 farms in our network, we've learned a lot about the diversity that exists among small farmers, and that besides working with them and turning them into your business partners, also understanding what their key challenges are is a really important way of supporting those small farms. One of them being that as farms move away from the traditional market and into the regulated market, it's a much tighter business model, obviously. Many of you guys understand that. And so you can fully expect that there'll be a whole cottage industry of farm-to-table dinners and tour the Emerald Triangle and those sorts of supplemental business opportunities by small farms up in Mendocino and Trinity and Humboldt. And so I encourage you to look for those additional opportunities besides simply making small farms your business partner, but also get out there and treat them like the craft wineries that we love to visit in Napa and Sonoma as well.
Mike?
So for me, I see this as what can the distributors do to help, right? I mean, distributors are a huge risk transfer for us. When we look at it, they're taking a lot of the burden, a lot of the costs, and a lot of those resources that larger companies can't afford to do and have in place. And for us, distributors really allow that smaller business to divert a lot of the risk over to them. So for us, we really want to support them. And I wish other states supported distribution more, and instead of having it just free-for-all, because a lot of businesses can't afford the auto and the employment and the workers' compensation, and then to bring on those SOP risks, or for those risks that are inherent for us. So I think the distributors, how I read it as, is the distributors are a huge risk diversion for a lot of the businesses that are out there that just can't afford to otherwise put it in place.
So the next question ties a little bit into what we've already talked about. Some of you mentioned legislation that could change, but from a policy standpoint, can you talk a little bit about how government, state and local, could be more proactive with cannabis distribution and upcoming issues that you think might change the landscape in the state or even locally? And we'll start with you, Tim.
You know, this is a tough one. It's a tough job being a regulator, and especially for a new industry like ours. We all know, right? This is we're barely into the first full year of cannabis legalization, and there's a lot of misunderstanding among the regulators. One of the things that I would like to see personally, and for the most part on the state side, I think they're doing the best job that they possibly can, and they're honestly seriously interested in helping us and seeing us succeed, because honestly, if we don't succeed, they don't succeed as well. So you have to think of it that way. But I would like more open communication as far as possibly them looking to us as potential as resources, as potential issues that may arise. And then, as simple as is when you have a question, simply is speeding up the turnaround and the thoroughness in which they address those questions. So sometimes, honestly, we've all gotten those emails from the regulator with the regulation. They just shoot back with the regulation that you asked them about. That doesn't help me one bit. It doesn't answer a question. It doesn't do anything like that. On the local level, I mean, you just got to understand that we're a business partner for those localities, that we are not coming in, we're not going to, turn their city into a dump or make it unsafe. In fact, we'll probably do the opposite and open up to us and allow us to come in there, especially on the retail end. We need more retail. We need way more retail. We do not have, the amount of retail we have will never fulfill the demand for the legal market. So we need the localities to open up. The state's open to it. If the locals license, then they will get licenses from the state. So we need that desperately. We need that open communication.
I don't have a whole lot to add, Tim. I mean, those are really good points. I mean, treating the distributor like a partner for the local and state regulators, which really, if you look at the way the state regulations are crafted, the distributor has a tremendous amount of responsibility and has been kind of deputized in a certain sense. They're responsible for collecting all of the tax and making sure that really all of the important public safety and tax collection requirements are met. And so I think, leaning on or soliciting input from the distributors about the issues that are coming down the pike, I think is really would be a really good idea. And hopefully for the regulators in the room, maybe there's something that we can do to facilitate that even more so. I know you all are very, very receptive and involved, but even maybe a little more so on those proactive fronts. And then the other, on the local level, Tim mentioned it before, but I think it's worth emphasizing, has to do with apportionment of local tax, where you have distributors that have hubs in different cities. They can't be taxed on the gross receipts in every single place just because it happens to stop there. So I think that's kind of a tax issue for this year that really needs to be addressed.
Agree with all those points. The additional point that I would make is, I guess I answered a question like this maybe a little less than a year ago on another distribution panel, and at that time what I was asking for was some sort of collaboration between state and local government to try to measure the business activity in the illicit market. And the idea was that we need to, I think the legislators said it too, that were here this morning, that this is all about, one side, the regulated market, growing in dominance, and the other side, the illicit market, shrinking into oblivion. But you never know what that change looks like unless you can actually measure it. I realized after talking about this with people for the last half a year that it's going to be pretty hard to measure the illicit market. I'm not sure how you're going to do it. BDS says you can't do it. No. Sorry, New Frontier. But what I was thinking would be helpful for state and local to collaborate on is simply maybe a map of all the counties in the state. And you could have just a simple red, yellow, green metric, right? Either red, none of the sales of cannabis in that county are operating under the regulated market. Yellow, maybe half or a quarter are operating in the regulated market based on the number of retail stores that are happening there, that are in existence there. And green, maybe at least, maybe half of the sales are happening in the regulated market. And then at least we'd have a tool to talk about opening up new markets with, because we don't even have that yet. To be able to walk into a board of supervisors and say, you're in the red, all of your cannabis sales are happening illegally. Do you really want to be in the red? Move over to the yellow, move over to the green. At least starts that conversation. And if that map could come from the state, I think that would be great.
Taking notes, I like that one. Go ahead, Mike.
I don't deal with too much policy, so I'm just going to move over to David on that one.
Cool. A couple points. One, I think there's an opportunity of building more community between the state and locals. Something I've been thinking a lot about, if you've been watching the news, Gavin's administration is ending the death penalty. I saw a big headline about that. I think there's an opportunity of letting everyone go that's in jail for cannabis and giving that, those people back into the communities that we're trying to help. I think it's a very good start. And then, with that, encouraging spaces for community and shared workspaces. There's a license for that. I think there's an ability of these states and locals to create areas to encourage cottage. With Prop 215, it was amazing with how much cottage and craft and small makers there were and the diversity of products that were available. And I think if you can have shared costs, you can have a way to incubate and help bridge that local and state level on the economic side.
Thank you. So I think the next question is very much like the last one, except that I want to understand how we ensure that distribution is done better. So the last questions have asked what can the state do, but how can we, as part of the distribution market, what are the activities we can do to make sure that distribution is done better from within the industry? Do you want to start, Nicole?
I was actually going to punt that to the business people.
All right.
Yeah, go for it.
Sure, I can jump in. So I guess I read the question as being the key phrase about a next generation effort.
Yep.
And so when I think of next generation, I think of not this year and maybe not even 2020, but in anticipation of the market that we all look forward to being a part of. I would really love to see the state tackle distribution by plane, because Alaska did. They're a gigantic state, and the reason why they made intrastate chartered distribution flights okay was because it's tough to get around on the roads. And it definitely skirts close, if not over the line, with regard to FAA regulations. But are we really going to truck all of this cannabis to New York when the boundaries fall? I think we're going to fly some of it too, and putting those pieces together would make sense from a next generation perspective, figuring out how to do this. And we've got all the right tools from a track and trace perspective, and we've got analogous industries that we can follow their lead and how they work with sensitive materials that are transported via plane. So I think that would be a great place to start putting some effort into from a next generation perspective, rather than once we get there and celebrate and say, oh, how are we going to move this around anyways?
So I see the next efforts as, eventually we're going to grow out of our smaller size distribution facilities. This industry is going to grow. I mean, it doesn't seem like that right now, but this industry is going to grow, and the distributor is going to have to meet that demand. And Sadie was talking to me about this. We have a facility in La Habra, California, right across the street from, it's some huge distribution network, big rigs, all that. We are going to be there one day. Well, I definitely agree for that. And we need to be thinking about how we build out for that, because right now we're in survival mode. We're trying to figure out how to get around the regs, how to get an annual license. We're on this kind of survival mode, and we're trying to figure out what the market's doing and all of that. But one of these days, and probably in the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to figure that stuff out, and this is just going to grow and grow and grow. And then obviously when the feds legalize, there's going to be interstate commerce, and guess what? California is going to be a major player, because we have the production here, and we grow the best weed, right? We grow the best cannabis, and everybody's going to want it, just the legal way. So that's where I kind of seen this go, and just surviving right now, but having our eye on the future and what it's going to be. So.
Yeah, all good points. I think the next move for us is standardization and packaging and SKUs and barcodes. It's quite difficult to understand, hey, I'll buy a case, but that means something different to everybody. And I think that would be really important to get right sooner than later.
So I definitely agree with the airlines. We insure a lot of the guys up in Alaska, and it minimizes a lot of the risk. But if over the next year, we start seeing a trend to where a lot of the product from north is going south, and we can actually track that, I would be all for the air, because it would actually move it. Instead of having cash and product on the roads, we would have it in the air, and it would be in a secure area where transfer would take place within an airport that already has TSA security built into it. It's a really good option, and I think the insurance industry would be absolutely for it 100%.
I mean, by the time we have cannabis in the air, we're going to have legalization on the federal level, and we'll have banking and all of that stuff. So I hopefully, yeah, I'm all for it. Let's do it via the air. Let's do it drones, whatever. Let's get it out there. So,
So my next question is for you guys. Who is here and fairly new to the industry? You want to raise your hand? All right, well, the next answer, I'm saying not very many, but the next answer is for you all. For those of you who are, for those of us who are new in the industry, in the audience, starting with you, Mike, because we're back to you. Can you talk to them about, as they enter, what advice you would have?
So over the years, we've seen, flour being the predominant product, and cookies were just a last-minute thought as went past the register. And watching the trends and watching the coverages that we provide because we actually break it down from edibles to smokes to vaporizer equipment, so we actually can see what products are actually being sold, or at least what's being insured. And the big trend we're seeing is definitely the oils, without a doubt. I mean, almost every one of our clients are 50% or more in an oil sale. Most of our guys that were doing growing and then they were just strictly doing retail have moved into oil. We're seeing trends and we can see that through the policy changes. So the actual policy owners are changing their actual classifications. So oil seems to be the big trend that we're seeing, at least from that. If it's a trend of just in general, I would say it's professional services consulting. We're seeing a huge increase in that side from an insurance point of view.
So for folks who are new to the industry,
yes,
what would you say?
I have a few things here. I think welcome first.
Welcome, yes.
I've been in it for about 5 years now. It feels like dog years though, but it's been great because we're fighting together on it. It's awesome. I think one of the things you're probably thinking about is whether to start your own thing or join a company. I think being a captain or crew is an important decision to make. So figure out what kind of crew you want to join. I think oftentimes you can learn a lot from experts in this industry than trying to make a lot of mistakes. The second thing is really around culture. I think as an industry, this thing started as a movement. There's a lot to be said about the advocacy that's been done, about the compassion that this has been built on, and honoring that and embodying it and talking to people to bridge that wisdom. And the last is pay your dues, and that can mean a bunch of things. Either paying your dues for doing the work on filling out a shipping manifest by hand and updating it and scanning it and all the things that have to do with that, or joining groups like this and the CCIA and paying your dues so that people have resources to go fight on our behalf. It's important to kind of recognize that it takes effort. We're all in here to work, and roll your sleeves up and get our hands green.
I would say if you're thinking about getting into this space, well, welcome. I kind of see this as when I was a regulator in 2015 and when I went to my first tour of a farm in Humboldt, and how the industry, accepted my group and really embraced us. So one, you need to find a mentor in the cannabis industry. You need to find someone who you can trust and who you can have some really honest heart-to-heart questions about what the industry's doing, the struggles to get in, etc. There's just lots of things. And earn your dues. Do your homework, read the regulations, fill out your own shipping manifest, do all of that stuff, because that's very important. And if you do those things, I think you'll get a good sense whether you want to do it or not. Maybe you don't want to do it. Maybe it's just it's just too crazy, especially right now. And I don't blame you if you wouldn't want to do it. It's a crazy world right now we're living in, and it's nothing normal. You have to be very flexible right now in this industry.
It'll be very practical advice. Just dealing with a lot of folks who are new to the industry or starting new businesses. The first would be to really, really research. If you don't know the segment of the industry that you think you want to be involved in, you really need to learn it before you try to even start calling a lawyer to set up a business to start that business. So really doing a tremendous amount of research to make sure you know what you're getting into, and have a very clear sense of your business plan and your mission. If you can't describe it in a couple sentences, you need to spend some more time thinking about it. I have a lot of phone calls where it's a lot around about what is it that you actually really want to do. And so, think about those things first. Think about them with mentors in the industry, and be willing to, as Tim kind of said, be willing to say, it wasn't what I thought it was going to be. Don't try to fit a square peg into a round hole, I guess, would be a way of saying it. The second thing would be, as you are forming business partnerships, you are at these conferences, you're new to the industry, you're meeting people who want to partner with you or who want to help finance your business, things like that. Use your gut instincts. If something seems too good to be true, or something just doesn't feel right with a partner or a deal, they want a document signed right away. No, you shouldn't have to have your lawyer look at it. It doesn't, you don't, I need it done right away. Those are the kinds of things, they're just red flags. There aren't really, with some exception, there aren't really emergencies in that sense. There isn't a deal that really needs to be done this second. So I would just make sure your antenna are up. There are, way more well-meaning and honest folks in the industry than not. But there are people around who you don't want to be in business with. So make sure you're paying attention to that. I encourage clients, depending on the transaction and who they're dealing with and how well they may or may not know this potential partner, we run background checks. I have my clients spend the money. It costs $500 or $600 to run a background check. You find out the litigation history of a potential partner. You find out how many lawsuits they've been involved in, how many times they've filed for bankruptcy, if they have, they've got warrants sometimes, or criminal problems, in other states, things like that. So I think that's always a really good idea, especially if you're going to put all your eggs in this business partnership entrepreneurship basket and it's someone you don't know all that well. I think that's a good idea. And then the last one was totally escaped. If I think of it again, I'll come back to it.
Sounds good. I got a response, and then I got a very short story to add some humor. I would say that if you're looking to join this industry, look in the mirror and understand what are the values that are driving you to this industry, because it's a place that has a lot of heart, and there's a lot of struggle, and nerves are frayed, and coming in because you want to strike it rich just isn't going to win people over right now. You need to. It's a lifestyle, and it's people's livelihoods. So I offer that, and then don't let this story characterize Flocana, but we had a situation where in hiring for a position, we had fantastic candidates, and we had to whittle them down and whittle them down and whittle them down. And at the end of it all, with 2 final candidates, one candidate said, "I should probably tell you, I don't smoke pot." And they didn't get the job. So try some products. Try some products and get familiar with what's out there if you don't already, because if you're going to work in the industry, you probably need to become conversant in what it's all about.
I mean, that's the fun part, right, guys? Yeah, no, just saying. Yeah, you'll feel tons better.
Thank you. Nicole, did you?
I remember my
Good
third point, but
advice.
now, it's so boring compared to that, which was, so smoke pot. And also, just take the time of course I'm gonna say this as a lawyer, but it really matters. Just take the time at the beginning to get your corporate house in order. If you start with a good clean slate and all of your documents, and you start to actually have a system in place where you are operating like a corporation or in a corporate fashion, so that you're actually documenting your meeting minutes, and you're taking all of the corporate formalities and steps that you really need to. It's going to make things so much easier once you actually are making money and are successful and you have a million things happening on a daily basis. So it seems like kind of a slog at the beginning, but it will pay off so much if you have all of that in order, especially if you at some point, if your idea is that you want to sell this business in, some period of years, or you even just want to, you want to do a big financing. No one's going to buy your business or give you a lot of money if you don't have your documentation in order. So that's the last one.
For the regulators and the lawmakers and staff, so we say obviously consume after work hours when you're not operating our vehicles. That's what they meant. That's what I'm saying.
You all understood that.
Of course.
With that, so we already started to talk a little bit about the trends in distribution, how we've seen a shift toward a lot more oils, but maybe, could you talk a little bit, because all of you have been there since the beginning, and you've seen this bird's eye view of what's changed in terms of trends in distribution. So do you want to talk
Sure.
about that shift?
Yeah, I think on 2 sides, I think there's a move for branded products. Low dose is something that we champion. A lot of newcomers that are coming through aren't your typical stoner. They're people that work day to day. They're women. They're senior citizens. They're across the board. So I think having a diverse menu that allows you to cater to these groups and onboard them the right way is super important than catering to those groups. I mean, everyone has someone that knows it's their birthday, so have something you go and give something to someone's birthday. You can gift, right? So you should gift more. I think gifting is going to be so underutilized right now. I mean, everyone should be gifting weed to more and more people in general, right? And I think there's a huge movement on social. I mean, you're seeing it now, like West Hollywood and like San Francisco, we have smoke lounges, but I mean, this thing is just in its infancy. I think there's going to be a movement into where you can do more social sharing, and that's where I think brands and things will catch on as you have more of a feeling around it. One thing that we do is leverage D2D, distributor to distributor. It's one of those bills that's part of the regs now that you can leverage other distributors and their networks and help them serve your area so that you can have a bit of a cost sharing, which is, I think, a good move.
I'm just going to pause and say I promised you this panel was going to be different than testing, and clearly it is. It's awesome. Go ahead, Tim.
Well, yeah, I agree with the distributor point. That is definitely a game changer, especially a company like Continuum. We deal with branded goods, and we deal with some large suppliers and who have distribution licenses, and so we're able to pass that product along a lot easier. They're able to test larger batches of products, so that's definitely from my time, at what was River at the time, and then now, things have changed. It was flower was king actually at first in the legalized market, at least for us. Now, obviously we're moving into vape cartridges and some of the manufactured products, so that is changing. I think a big thing that we need to look at, and that will get better over time, is just simply analytics. We need to know, especially on the retail side, as distributors, we need to know what our customers, the retailers, they want. What kind of analytics do we have on what area of the state they're in? A neighborhood in LA could be different than the one right across the street, just in the type of consumer we're dealing with and the types of products they want. So as distributors, we want to know all of that information on analytics, and how do we give our account managers the tools to walk in there and to sell the correct product for that dispensary.
I'm seeing an opportunity, or I don't know if you'd call it a trend quite yet, but for distributors to provide more services for retailers in terms of order fulfillment, logistics. That's a little less what you would think of as a traditional distributor function, a little bit more what looks like a little more retail facing, and then providing back end services to the retailers who are actually selling to their customers. That's the one that comes to mind for me.
I think something as far as trends in distribution, it's also being recognizing that there's not just a physical service that you're providing, but you're really providing a whole ecosystem to become a part of. If you've got a product that you're looking to have distributed, then you want that product to live with a family of other like-minded products and be attractive to the current consumers of those other like-minded products. And so I think that ecosystem approach is an exciting way for distributors to level up just beyond getting it from point A to point B and make sure that it's clean and compliant, and getting it there on time. And that can become a whole bunch of different things. That can turn into activation events where you've got a whole suite of products that are and a closed environment, educational environment for bud tenders, and there's a lot that can be done there that I think we're just starting to scratch the surface on, and I'm hopeful that distributors will get more creative in how they do that.
And Mike, you answered this
Already
in
answered
part,
my
but
question, yes.
all right.
Yes.
So let's go to the next one. And several of you touched on how branding has changed within the distributor environment. But what about branding of distributors? What steps are distributors specifically taking to promote your brand and stand out among the competition? Is that a thing? And Tim, I think you're up.
Well, yeah, obviously that's a big issue. That's something when I was first hired on with River, we talked about. Now that the mergers happened, we're with Continuum, that has been one of the bigger issues. And, putting our logo on this board and, is one of those ways. But, definitely creating a social media platform and advertising to our dispensaries about what Continuum is, what we do, our core values. That's incredibly important. We're not a brand per se. We're not on any product, but we want to be a brand for our suppliers and then also our end customer, the retailers. So that's a major part of what we're doing right now, and it's only going to get better. So.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add.
Yeah. How about you?
I guess I'll follow up. I guess I sort of answered that question with my last response, but I think that what's interesting and exciting, just for us from Flocana, is that with with sort of a corner of the distribution market that we live in being around as sun-grown products, small farms, regenerative agriculture, all of those themes sort of live together, and we're starting to see interest in collaboration across industry lines too, with other industries, similar players in other industries that want to collaborate. So, natural foods or outdoor gear or those types of things, where it's not simply, we're not just living in the cannabis industry, and I'm not saying that we're gonna distribute, Patagonia or something like that, but the interest in collaboration and bigger efforts is starting to emerge. That means that this industry is really getting a lot of notice, and not just for the challenges that we face.
I also think there needs to be some branding on what distributors actually do. There's a lot of confusion on, and this is something we try to do as well. What kind of services do we provide you? Our big thing is there's a lot of things distributors do. We facilitate testing, we collect taxes, we hire account managers to go out and sell your product. There's just all these different things, and there's just building this relationship of trust as well with our suppliers, knowing that we have their best interest in mind. Those are all important things that we need to brand as distributors. So those are very important to me, and to prove our worth too. How we actually provide a amazing service to suppliers.
I would say when it comes to branding, especially, a few of my friends that are lawyers here, we just got back from a huge law conference, and the big discussion was the plaintiff bars are meeting regularly to determine, how do they come after the industry. And the branding is going to be one of the big areas they go to, right? And for us as an insurance industry, we may or may not cover you in those particular incidences. So you have to be very careful about the policies and insurance that you guys purchase, but more importantly, allowing somebody else to brand your product. Because ultimately you could be held responsible for your product regardless if somebody else branded it or not. Because in the end, it's still your product. And so making sure that the branding that you have okayed has been gone through your legal team. It is covered under your insurance policies, and that would be my recommendation when it comes to branding.
Cool. I think for distributors, it's really important to understand, who your audience is and who you're serving. And I think when people talk about brand, they think about, what logo is going to be on a billboard. And it's way different, because who you're serving are the dispensaries, who you're serving are the farmers. And in distribution land, I feel it's more about reputation, right? If you ask any dispensary buyer, do they like their distributor? What is their answer? If you ask, hey, am I getting paid on time from my distributor? They will give you an answer. And so I think that it's important to focus as a distributor more on your services and your rep versus a logo that you can put it out there. I think there's an immense amount of pressure to get it done right, especially a lot of the compliance requirements fall on the distributor. But I think it's also important to make sure that it's a partnership and that you're communicating with everybody. There are mistakes, there are always going to be mistakes, but whether or not people can work through them effectively is important.
Elizabeth? I'm going to, since we're talking about branding, and I don't think we're going to touch on that again in the rest of these questions, I just wanted to bring this related point up. So under under BCC Reg 5032, the sort of fix to all of that, or the proposed solution, is that if there's a licensing agreement in place, so you're a brand and you have licensed your brand to a distributor or to a manufacturer, but here we're talking about distributors, because that distributor is going to be the one that puts the label on the package and sells it through. You as that brand, you're going to need to be included as a regulatory owner, quote unquote owner, on that distributor's license in order for that contract to work. And so a practical point that I like to bring up whenever I have the opportunity to have a big room like this is to make sure that your contracts are accounting for that, and that you make sure that you are specifically talking about that regulatory owner status, what that means, what it doesn't mean, so there's no confusion, because that word owner in this context doesn't actually mean that that brand owns any part of your business or your license. So making that clear in your contracts, making your indemnification provisions and your limitations of liability sections in your contracts specifically refer to these regulatory owner designations. Putting things into other types of contracts that relate to those, to being an owner or a financial interest holder, that there are obligations to provide information to the licensee, and that there will be ongoing obligations to update that information if things happen that invalidate you, make you no longer eligible to be an owner. So just kind of practical things that really applies to all licensees, but to distributors who are licensing intellectual property in particular.
Thank you. So I think we're going to take one more question, and then I'm going to close by letting you each say final comments. If there's something that you didn't say that you really want this audience to hear today. And because we're a mix of regulators and industry here, I think we've talked about some of the challenges from sampling to apportionment, but is there a regulation that you would like to see clarified first and foremost, or a law that you really say, I get questions as a distributor about this, or as an attorney or as an insurer all the time, and if someone could issue an FAQ on this specific one, it would be, and Nicole, I'm gonna start with you.
Sure. Oh, so many.
One.
I think the one that I mentioned before with regard to distributors particularly has to do with the distributor-to-distributor transfer. And to the extent that the regulators interpret that to mean that a COA cannot transfer from one distributor to the other, I would encourage a change to that rule, because I don't think it really makes sense. Given how much, like I mentioned before, how much responsibility the distributors already shoulder. The concept that they can't or shouldn't be allowed to maintain a basic chain of custody from a bulk batch that's been tested to get to see that through to the next distributor who might do the packaging, just seems to me to be a bottleneck that maybe wasn't intended, but that I think we should try to address.
Absolutely. I'm going to say the clarification, what I would need is for the cultivation tax, which there's a lot of confusion on which distributor is, whose requirement it is to collect that cultivation tax. Now, I think it's the final distributor, but essentially that is not working in the system. And I know I mentioned earlier, like, hey, let's get rid of the cultivation tax entirely because it's just impossible to collect. But we need some clarification on which distributor can collect that tax and ultimately remit it.
I think it's a good point that you guys may have a clear interpretation, but if you get so much pressure from your clients that they don't believe you, then, that's a cog in the system. So let's go this way, and we'll come fully around to you.
I'd say CBD. Cannabis, we know we can't transfer across state lines, but CBD, we get a call every single day, 5 times a day, and it's saying, well, I've got a product, I'm going to transfer it from this state to this state, and my lawyer says I can do that, right? And so instead of challenging that problem, because I don't have the clarification to be absolutely clear, we simply just ask them then, have your lawyer put it on a letterhead and put their license on the line for it. Because we don't have the true clarity whether or not they can. You see it at Amazon, or you see it at, big, huge box stores. I can't tell you what's legal and what's not. I can tell you cannabis is not, right, when it goes from store to store outside of the licensing process. But I can't tell you without a doubt, except for my law firm, when they give me a legal opinion that I pay for, that says, no, you can't do it right now. There's nothing clarifying that you can do it. So that would be our biggest one that would open up a lot of market for us.
Yeah, I think there's already a lot of legislation in play right now, so maybe just touch on some of the things that you can support and tell people to move along. SB 475 with the sampling is important. SB 67 with the licenses. AB 858 with the appellations is, I think, a important move. You also have the compassion bill with Senator Weiner, who was here earlier. I mean, there's a lot of stuff moving through, and I think that's going to make things better for everybody.
Oh man, they took them all.
Ah.
You know, I think that
There's more.
D2D transfers is definitely one of the tops on my list, and probably apportionment is pretty high up there too. How is this actually supposed to work if every local jurisdiction decides that they want to tax the distributor who distributed the product as well? I think that's where I'm going to put my chips.
And I said I'd give you 30 seconds each to close. So, Mike, 30 seconds.
30
closing
seconds.
comments.
I would agree with them down there when they're saying, make sure you look at your documentation, make sure you look at your agreements, make sure you look at your insurance contracts, and make sure you're working with professionals and hold those professionals accountable for their actions that you work with them. And I'd say that's my best advice.
Cool. So this event's one of my favorite events. I've been coming every year. So I'm just gonna, just say I'm really grateful for everybody and everyone's participation and showing up year after year, session after session. It's been a bit, and I think everyone that's here and looking out in the audience, it's such a cool view to see us still smiling, right? Everyone's still sort of smiling. So I just want to say thank you. There's an immense amount of gratitude that I think I try to embody in this industry and this movement. And if we can get a little bit of that more, it helps power us through those long nights and long days.
Thanks, CCIA. Love you. Thank you for all you do for the cannabis industry. You guys are great. Been with you guys on many battles in the Capitol, and thank you for your support. Just one quick parting advice. Was in a meeting in LA with a couple of legislators and about communication on how we communicate to our regulators and how we communicate to our lawmakers. We all are under duress right now. It's troubling. Our livelihoods are at stake, but we need to be able to communicate clearly and in a way that doesn't sound like we're whining to these folks, because it doesn't go over well. I'll just tell you that way. And it was interesting to hear their kind of almost frustrations with that. We need to come to the table with solutions, and that's just kind of my 2 cents on the way out of here. So.
Breathe.
Yeah. Just take a deep breath.
Can't beat that. Stick around till the end. It'll be fun to visit with everybody during the reception. I hope to chat with more of you.
And thank you, CCIA, and thank you all for attending
Thank you,
this
Liz.
afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You guys did a great job.